All right. Calling a special meeting of the City Council to order regarding Agenda Bill 18111, Resolution 1461, approving the Salish Expansion Plan, Residential and Planned Commercial Industrial Master Plan, PCI 180001, and adopting the Planning Commission's findings of facts, conclusions, law, and recommended conditions of approval. This is a closed session with due to the fact it's a closed record pursuant to RCW 42.30.140, Section 2. And so consequently, we won't be taking the public testimony. And at this time, before we begin, we're going to go into an executive session pursuant to RCW 42.30.110, Section 1I, triple I, lowercase I, pertaining to this issue. So with that, guys okay with grabbing your food again, heading upstairs? All right, let's do that. Ask Bob Larson and Bob Sturbank to join us. And Jason and Mark.
Box,
All right.
we can get it faster.
All right, with that, we're out of executive session, and we're back into the special session regarding the Salish expansion. Jason, I'll turn it over to you to cue things up.
Thank you, Mayor. So we'll jump right back into the issue matrix, Council, and just to recap, we worked our way through most of.
Actually, yeah, Mr. Mayor, before,
Oh,
yeah, point of order.
All right.
I'm sorry. Yeah, sorry,
Before
Jason.
turning it to Mr. Rogers, if we can address the appearance of fairness doctrine issues as we have at the start of each of the meetings. And so, as with past meetings, Council, I would like to poll the Council concerning whether there has been, first of all, whether there's been any change in any relationships, memberships, acquisition of property. You remember there were a series of questions. I'm assuming, unless someone tells me, that there hasn't been any change in those, but I'll just go down the list. Councilmember Jeans.
No change?
Councilmember Ross.
No change.
Councilmember Holloway.
No change?
Councilmember Mayhew.
No change.
Councilmember Lassay.
No change.
Councilmember Sundwall.
No change.
And Councilmember Shepherd.
No change.
Thank you. And then the other more specific question has to do with whether you've had any ex parte or off-the-record communications with any proponent or opponent of the project. So now we're talking about the time period between when the council last met and now. And if you could please disclose whether there have been any such communications, and if so, a brief description of the substance. Councilmember Jeans.
No.
Councilmember Ross.
Yes, I think several of us have received an email from a resident concerning our membership belonging to the club and the discount that is provided to us if we went to the Salish.
Okay, Councilmember Holloway.
Same set of emails from a particular citizen regarding discount available to citizens and to members of the club. However, I do not feel it rises to the level of recusal.
Okay, Councilmember Mayhew.
None.
Councilmember Lassay.
I received the same emails that were directed at several council members on the subject of being a member of the club at Snoqualmie Ridge and receiving a discount at the Salish Lodge.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Sundwall.
I'm not a member of the club, so it didn't apply to me.
Did, the
I did
question-
receive the email,
You did receive the same
and
communication.
I read most of it,
Okay,
and it doesn't have any factor on anything I'm doing.
all right. Councilmember Shepherd.
I received the email as well.
All right, thank you. Is there any party proponent, opponent that would like to rebut or address the substance of the communications?
Rachel Nathanson, speaking on behalf of the Muckleshoot Indian Tribe. Thank you very much. We have Alan Stevens here, who is general manager of the Salish Lodge and Spa, and I think he can address what this discount issue is and perhaps put some of this to rest and give some assurance as to its applicability. So I'm just going to turn it over to Alan. Thank you.
Right, and for the record, that under the appearance of fairness doctrine, when there's been an ex parte or off-the-record communication, then the either of the parties or any of the parties is entitled to an opportunity to rebut the substance of it. So this is the applicant's opportunity to address the substance of the communications and the allegations that council has received. Thank you. Mr. Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Starbuck, and thank you, council members. Appreciate your consideration of the expansion so far. Thank you, Mayor Larson, for having me this evening. First of all, I believe there's a one item that should be cleared up, that I, as a team member of Columbia Hospitality and representative of the Salish Lodge and Spa, want to make it clear that that Columbia Hospitality does not have any ownership interest in either the Salish Lodge and Spa or the club at Snoqualmie Ridge. I believe there are some questions in regards to the discount afforded to club at Snoqualmie Ridge members. That is in fact a thing. There's also, however, a discount that is applied to all residents of the Snoqualmie area. That has been in longstanding since even before Columbia Hospitality managed the Salish Lodge and Spa, and the ownership and Columbia Hospitality felt it was important to continue that tradition to reward our most loyal and frequent guests. It is not a discount to the Ridge residents. It is not a discount to just the club at Snoqualmie Ridge residents. It is an unofficial, word-by-mouth discount that is applied. There are no IDs that are required. It is one that when we see our most frequent guest over and over again, that we apply it quite liberally. So it is our way of recognizing our best guests. And it's, pretty frequent in the industry. I'll use quotation marks on this one a little bit, in more remote properties, whereas you require and want that loyal following of your locals, especially in need periods in the off seasons. So it's something we're very proud to offer and have extended, as I said, liberally throughout the years, and happy to take any further questions on the issue. Oh, and I believe, sorry, one more point, that we do not plan to adjust this discount or designate it between the current Salish Lodge and Spa and the proposed expansion.
In other words, it would apply to the expansion as well.
Absolutely. We see no changes forthcoming.
Great.
Thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Stevens. Yeah.
And Mr. Stevens, just so I'm clear and the record's clear, so the discount has existed for some years prior to the application for the expansion?
Yeah, yeah. Like I said, even before Columbia Hospitality started managing the property in 2007.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Holloway and then Councilmember Mayhew.
Is, just for clarity, is the discount for golf club membership and the discount for local resident the same or different? And if they're different, are the percentages the same?
The percentages are identical.
Okay.
Thank you, Councilman Holloway.
Mayor, Councilman.
Councilmember Mayhew, I'm sorry.
So so I'm a member of the Club of Snoqualmie Ridge.
Thank you.
In any of the materials associated with my membership there, does it tell me that I can get a discount at the Salish Lodge?
It is the only printed advertisement of said discount, and it is part of the perceived value of joining the club.
Right, and there's other things that as a member I also receive, for example, invitations to various events.
Correct.
And that any of those things, if I was not paying if I no longer paid my membership, if I stopped my membership, I would no longer get those benefits?
Well, again, I don't know your residence, Councilman,
Snoqualmie.
Mayor.
Yeah.
So,
Council members are required to be Snoqualmie residents.
okay, very good, excellent. As am I. So the 20% would still apply if you mentioned it or we knew of you over the years at the Salish Lodge. The 20% would still apply.
So any benefit that I get exclusively because I'm a member is in exchange for my membership fees that I pay?
I believe.
Because I wouldn't get them if I wasn't a member?
The privileges you receive at the club at Snoqualmie Ridge as part of your membership dues, those are required, whether use of the pool, golfing, dining, et cetera. But they have no way on your discounts or privileges at Salish Lodge and Spa.
He was coming a different way. If he didn't pay his dues and memberships, or he sold his membership at the club, those privileges would go away.
Any privileges that I get from the club
Correct.
would cease?
Yes, absolutely.
So any privileges I get in exchange for my membership are in exchange for my membership fees?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sorry I didn't answer it better.
It was just, we were both going to the same point, it's fine.
Councilmember Shepherd.
So I called the Salish Lodge and I asked if I could get a discount to stay there as a resident, and they said no.
That is correct. This is on food and beverage only.
Okay, so as far as staying, but there is a 30% discount for lodging if you are a member of the golf club, right?
Yes,
Okay, so
Yeah,
that-
all is
so
subject to
there is a-
availability.
There
Yeah.
is a difference there,
there is indeed.
yeah.
Councilmember Ross.
I think in one of the Snoqualmie Ridge ROA newsletters, it's been a while, but they do, it talked about the discount that Salish provides to the residents. I mean, I have read it there before, so I think it has been announced to at least all the Snoqualmie Ridge residents. I don't know about downtown.
Yeah, there's been Facebook posts on it, et cetera, and we try our best to make it word of mouth, because obviously we have an obligation to our ownership as well. But it is something that as I said, is applied liberally.
All right. So if there's no other questions, Mr. Stevens, thank you for coming. And please extend on my behalf of an apology to your staff for having to field what I think were probably 10 or 15 phone calls about discounts last week. So.
No worries at all. Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. Thank you, council members. Have a good evening. Thank you.
Including one from me, so. She seemed well rehearsed.
And Mayor, if I can, then not, and I realize we don't have many in the audience, but is there any party of record that wishes to object to the participation of any council member based on the disclosures that have been made? And the only party of record I see are representatives from the applicant this evening.
We have no objection. This is Terry Danish on behalf of the.
All right. And then if I should ask Mayor also whether any council member wishes to recuse themselves on the basis of the information, and I'll just go down the list. Councilmember Shepherd?
No.
Councilmember Sunwall?
No.
Councilmember Lassay?
No.
Councilmember Mayhew?
No.
Councilmember Holloway?
No.
Councilmember Ross?
No.
Councilmember Jeans?
No.
All right, thank you. Mayor, that concludes my colloquies on the appearance of fairness doctrine, and I would turn it back to Mr. Rogers at this time if there no other questions from council.
All right, great. So Jason, you have an hour and a half left to get to what you need to do.
All right. Thank you, Mayor. So jumping back into the issue matrix, going down the list, the first one that we still had some questions on was number 12 about affordable housing. If you recall, the council removed some language in one of the conditions about affordable housing, and then staff had indicated we would look at some revised language, and I'm looking for it here, and we can't put it up on the screen because we simply don't have it available, but the council is interested in some more general language. And so what we would add on is changing the 30 years to 50 years, and then adding some language that reads, alternatively, the affordable housing plan may include such other components or features as may be approved by the city council in its discretion, including but not limited to those identified in the Growth Management Act. Compliance with the approved affordable housing plan shall be a condition of preliminary plat approval and any subsequent permit or approval for development of the planned residential plan. So the language is significantly more general than what the Planning Commission recommended. We'll certainly get that to you in writing prior to the council taking any action on the master plan application, but we wanted to at least read that to you, and hopefully it meets with at least some sounds good nods, not your formal approvals yet, because you haven't seen it in writing.
Councilman Ross?
Are you reading from the matrix?
No.
Okay.
The language was, we didn't have the language available when we finalized the matrix. So that's why I'm reading it to you right now, but we'll get it to you in writing.
Well, were you reading from email?
Yes.
Can you forward that email to Jody, and at least what was read is now physical part of the record?
We'll clean it up and get it to you. The email exchanges between city staff and the applicant, and so we'd like to get the council something that's reasonably final.
Can you reread it then, please?
Yes.
I was looking for it.
Well, wait.
I see.
Bob, I guess I'm having an issue here that we're either entering it into the record or we're not.
Well, all the work they're doing will be in the record.
So to clarify, this is the Planning Commission's findings, conclusions, and recommend conditions. You see it's got some red lines on it already. I've started modifying it to add, for example, on the back page here, these are two of the conditions the council has essentially concurred with. One of them is about the forest management plan, and the other one is about the parking management plan. You're going to see this before you take any action because you need to see it. It's essentially the summary of everything you've discussed and changes you want to make. So we're going to integrate it into this. You're going to see this next week, hopefully. So you will see this in writing, guaranteed.
Councilor Mayhew.
I'm sorry, I just missed the very beginning. What was the thing you were reading from?
Okay, what I was reading the condition that
No, I'm sorry, just the document in your
this
hand.
this is the Planning Commission's findings, conclusions, and conditions.
And so what will happen? Will there be, I'm guessing that there'll be a findings of fact, conclusions, conditions from the council?
Correct.
And so that's the draft document. You started with that recommended by or passed by the Planning Commission, and you're modifying it for things that have come out of the council. Is that what's happening?
Yes, correct.
And so we'll see that, and we'll be able to read it then, and then we'll have a chance to comment if we have any concerns about that wording. Is that right?
Correct.
Sounds good to me.
And Jason, you said you communicated with the applicant on some of those changes and details, and they were
Yes.
in concurrence or agreement with the changes? Or?
Yes, there are a couple minor wording issues that we need to correct, which is why we have not forwarded it to the council, because we don't have a full concurrence on exact wording as of yet, but that
Right.
should be forthcoming.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
That's quick.
Councilman Losay.
Can we just touch on schedule real quick? Which meetings we have coming up that are related to Salish, which ones are related to other things? So what are our scheduled Salish expansion review meetings?
So we have the workshop tonight. We've got another hour and a half to go. The council could certainly continue the discussion in the regular meeting tonight if you so desire. And then there is a workshop next Monday, starting at 5 p.m., which is generally scheduled for budget deliberations for the council. We could, and are certainly planning to add in at least a short Salish deliberation if the council wishes to take action, or if the council has a few more issues they'd like to discuss. So that's the current state of the schedule. If we need to add additionals.
I'm getting to a specific question.
Okay.
Bear with me here. If we choose to use next Monday instead of on budget discussions, but on Salish, when's the next meeting for the Salish?
There's no other meeting scheduled for the Salish at this point.
So let me ask the question then. If you say we're going to get that language sometime next week, we will not have any meetings to discuss that information. When are we going to get that information to discuss
Then
it?
it will be later this week.
Because we're out of meetings.
Yeah.
The next time we'll have a chance to talk about it is the next council meeting.
My apologies. I'm used to a 2-week
Action
schedule
is
here.
being
so-
requested to be
Yeah,
taken.
there's no reason we won't be providing this to, council very shortly. So
I'm
you got it
just-
in advance of next Monday.
That's why I have a
We were
draft
hoping to
already.
get through, as a goal, get through the matrix today, and then have that discussion about what remains for your comfort level, and decide on a meeting, given the motion was through October 31st.
I'm trying to figure out how to say this, because I recognize that this is not an easy process for everyone. But those 3 motions that we had at the last meeting were 2 weeks ago. And we don't have any language that addresses those motions, that shows us that there's an update, that shows us that it's been incorporated. I'm concerned that we're going to go through all this, and we're going to be dumped a document in front of us on a meeting and at the time at which we're supposed to make a decision. I'm just voicing that concern. We don't need to talk about it if you don't want to, so.
Jason, did you, or Mark, go ahead and respond, then I'll go to
I
Councilman.
just want to clarify, it's not that we don't want to talk about it. We imagine that we would have a check-in at the end of this meeting to kind of see what your comfort level was going forward, see how best to use the 29th. But we're still reacting to the council's motion to wrap up review by the 31st.
Councilman Mayhew.
Yeah, I had the very same concern that my fellow council member was just expressing. I think if you could just, as you look at the dates, and I know you guys are working with a lot of things, but if you could just understand the concern, if we're to make the 31st and there's only one meeting left, which we can use to do that, and so in order for that to have a chance of happening, we would need to receive that document that we'll be potentially acting on with enough time to get comfortable with it and feedback any concerns to you guys so that when we meet, you're in a position to right out of the gate address those and get us to closure. I think that's the concern here, is just making sure you see a timeline that allows us to have enough time to deliberate and get to a conclusion.
We did, we just haven't discussed that with the applicant. We're still operating under the motion. But given that you're bringing it up now, one of the scenarios was to, at the council's pleasure, take action on the 29th pursuant to returning with final reviewed, amended findings of fact reflecting the council's comment through the 29th. That may take place after the 31st, but we haven't had that conversation with the applicant or the council yet.
Councilman Mayhew.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was suggesting, is that, so that's a week from today. And so in order for us to take final action on that date, I think what the concern here is we'll need to see that document well in advance of that, so in the next few days.
Yep.
So we have time to digest it, provide any comments back to you all, so that when you come in on the 29th, you're able to address all remaining comments, and we actually have a chance of reaching that goal. And I think we'd all like to see that happen, but we're just worried about having time to be deliberative. So if you could work that into your timeline, that's the
We
suggestion.
can, given that it was a weekend and the applicant needed till Monday to get back to us, and that has occurred. Had we had one more business day, I believe all the comments right up till tonight that resulted in amendments to conditions of approval would have been wordsmithed and given to you or forwarded to you in draft form. But it doesn't mean to preclude that you can't have comments to that effect additional tonight that we can address.
So your plan was to bring those comments along with any other things tonight to wrap that up and then send that out per their concerns, correct?
Right. I mean, this draft document, which of course you don't have, is in reasonably good shape, taking into account the council's comments to date, except for the affordable housing comment. So anything you tell us tonight, we'll work hard to get it integrated, tomorrow, and get the applicant's concurrence and get it out to you.
Councilmember Sunwell.
So we're coming up on 45 minutes on procedural stuff, and all of it's important, but we have 10 pages to go and an hour and 15 minutes to do it.
Thank you, I concur. Sustained.
If you can do that, great.
I'm being facetious, but
Okay.
I'm Councilmember Ross.
So, okay, can you reread the statement again, please, regarding
Yes.
affordable housing?
Let me pull my email back up. Okay. So instead of the struck language, we would say, alternatively, the affordable housing plan may include such other components or features as may be approved by the city council in its discretion, including but not limited to those identified in the Growth Management Act, specifically RCW 36.70A.540 sub 2 E through H. Compliance with the approved affordable housing plan shall be a condition of preliminary plat approval and any subsequent permit or approval for development of the planned residential plan. So what that means is that the council could consider additional aspects for the affordable housing plan as laid out in the Growth Management Act, and that they would be and that the affordable housing plan is continues to be conditioned on preliminary plat approval.
Councilmember Ross, you still have the floor, and then we'll go to Councilmember Lissay. The applicant would also like to respond, I guess, to an issue there.
So when you read it before, I thought it included going from the 30 to the 50 years.
Oh, it does include that too. That's in a different sentence that I neglected to read the second time.
Okay, what is that sentence, please?
It says, it says, and that the units are committed to continuing affordability for at least 50 years.
Okay.
All right. Terry, did you want to comment specifically on that before
Well, may I?
I go to Councilmember Lissay?
Council members, Terry Danish on behalf of the Muckleshoot Indian Tribe. I think the upshot of the language that Mr. Rogers has read to you a couple of times is that it will be incumbent upon us, the proponent, to come to you, the council, with any kind of proposal that's an alternative to that, the preliminary language that we just discussed, the 50 years and the development on site, et cetera, of affordable housing, and persuade you that any kind of proposal that we make, which could be a fee in lieu potentially, because that's allowed under the Growth Management Act, would be a better option. And if you don't agree, then you obviously have the option of moving forward with the language that already exists. So it's really, all this does is give us a chance to come back to you with an alternative that you can consider but reject if you so choose.
Councilmember Lissay, then Councilmember Mayhew.
Mr. Sturbank, please correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that the conclusions are on the record and were provided on the record by the Planning Commission. My understanding is that this council, through motion and voting, removed language from condition number 9.
Correct. And
where does it say that then new language that is not currently on the record can be added to change that situation?
Council asked us to bring back language that would not tie the council to any specific other alternative, but would in general terms allow the council the potential to consider a different type of program as part of the affordable housing. And so that's what this language seeks to do, and I apologize, I was trying to get my hand up before to give you that general purpose statement. That's what we were aiming for.
I would like to see the transcripts of that says that we did that, because I remember the discussion and the motion was to strike all of that language. It wasn't to add new language in, it wasn't to.
And we
to
did
do those
strike
things.
the language when you see the red line strikeout version of that condition 9, you'll see that we did strike the language per the council's
Then someone needs to
direction.
explain to me where on the record, then, on the recording of our meeting, that it says we said, oh, well, but let's go ahead and talk about it. That wasn't part of the motion. The motion was to take that language out. Done. That was it. It wasn't to rewrite condition number 9. Unless somebody remembers it different than
Well,
I do.
I thought there was, I mean, I don't respect,
There was
the one
discussion about
detail
it,
I do
but there was
recall
no
was the
motion.
request to go from 30 to 50, or did you not want that included, or?
That wasn't a part of the motion. There was discussion about it,
So
but the motion was very specific.
So you don't want the 50, or you want to remain at 30 year?
I would like somebody to review the record of what was discussed and follow what was passed by this council.
Councilmember Mayhew.
I just wanted to clarify on the applicant's comments, what therefore would be the timing. I thought what I understood, but I wasn't sure I was getting it right, was that if this happens with these words that we're talking about, if this is what gets approved, is that the correct word? Approved? Is that
Correct,
what we're
yeah.
going to potentially doing? Approved. This alternate wording would come before this approval, or this wording would result in somewhere down the line, perhaps before preliminary plat, or at somewhere down the line is when the applicant would then have an opportunity to come back and offer alternatives to the particular wording here. It's just the timing is the point I want to get at.
Right, so
January.
even under condition 9 as recommended by the planning commission, the applicant, prior to receiving preliminary plat approval, was to bring the city and for council approval an affordable housing plan that specified exactly what types of units and where and the layout and those types of things. There was language, as Councilmember Lassay observed, that the council moved to strike. This revision makes it clear that the council, in its discretion, may, as part of the affordable housing plan, consider other types of program elements similar to those listed by the legislature in the Growth Management Act. Those include, but aren't limited to, locating the housing within the general area as opposed to on-site, include a fee and lieu program, include some other things if the council wanted to go there. And some council members had made comments on the record. Councilmember Lassay may recall the.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get a timing
Right,
question.
timing will be, it'll come to you in an affordable housing plan at or prior to, as part of, or prior to preliminary plat approval.
Okay, so regardless of whether the wording is as it was recommended by the Planning Commission or gets modified, regardless, the action either way will actually occur, that the final decision will occur at a later date.
Correct.
At which time the applicant will come forward with some specific proposals, which will be evaluated at that time, and something will then be determined at that time by this body.
Correct.
Thank you.
Councilmember Shepherd.
So the master plan happens first, and the preliminary plat happens subsequent to that?
Correct.
Okay.
Preliminary plat on the residential side, binding site improvement plan for the hotel commercial side are the next approvals.
Any other questions or comments on this item, council? All right, with that, we'll move on to the next item.
Mayor, if I may, the one thing I am looking for is if, in general, the proposed language, if the council.
We don't
never
see- we don't
never
have
mind.
the
The council the
proposal.
language
Okay,
and
first
they-
We'll get the,
and
yeah,
get
we'll
us
get you
direction.
language. Okay. The next one up is about the location of the site. There's an email from Councilmember Shepherd.
What about
asking-
number 13?
We left off, we finished number 15 at the last meeting.
13 I have is closed.
Oh, okay.
Number 14 about the site location. So Councilmember Shepherd had a couple additional questions. And so there's a table in there where I match up the parcels from the development agreement to the parcels in the master plan. And so you can see that table in your matrix, specific to the, and I have reviewed the legal descriptions in exhausting detail here. Unfortunately, there is no map in the record that I can show you other than the site survey that's in the master plan application. So certainly I can refer to that, but there's no mapping of the legal descriptions in the development agreement. So my ability to show you a map is limited. I can certainly describe things verbally, but
For all the parcels that are listed and all of the amendments and development agreement?
well, ultimately, the amended and restated development agreement is the one that matters because that's the only one in force right now. And so I can certainly compare, for example, parcel B in the development agreement matches the legal description for parcel A in the master plan, and on down the line, parcel F matches parcel C, H matches B, and L matches D. Those legal, I've reviewed all those legal.
Is that in here?
You can look on page 19 of the issue matrix. There's a table that matches the parcels.
Okay, so what happened to J?
Parcel J is not part of the master plan application because it was describing a parcel that I believe at the time was not in the city of Snoqualmie. So the original development agreement had a listing of, I believe, 8 or 9 parcels, and it divided the parcels up into those parcels that were within the city of Snoqualmie at the time and those that were not within the city of Snoqualmie at the time. As parcel now, the whole site's been annexed, one, so that's a change. And second, any description of the Tokel parcel is no longer applicable because that was conveyed to the city in 2005 or 6, I believe. And so the city owns that. It is not part of the master plan application.
So if we see a parcel J in these development agreements and amendments, it no longer applies, or what happened to that?
Let me see here. So parcel J is not listed as being part of the Morgan parcel legal description, so it is not a subject of the amended and restated development agreement as it exists. Certainly it was a part of the original development agreement, but it was describing a parcel. It was describing, or I shouldn't say a parcel, it was describing a particular area, which, like I said, I believe was not within the city of Snoqualmie at the time.
So
It was
how is this contract still valid if we had an amendment, a second amendment, that added what was a huge parcel, and part of it was not in the city limit, still isn't in part of the city limits, and we didn't have like a public hearing for it?
The development agreement, when it was originally adopted, addressed the same property you see today. So all of the Morgan parcel and all the Tokel parcel at the time. The northern portion of the Morgan parcel was not within the city of Snoqualmie at that time. It was unincorporated King County. Before the development agreement was formally adopted, the city went through I should back up. One of the provisions in the development agreement was going through the annexation process. That occurred. The development agreement then formally applied to all those parcels because they were all then within the city. At that point, the Second Amendment revised some legal description to correct an error, but also some of those parcels got combined because, of course, there's then no need to separately describe parcels that were within the city and not within the city.
So
they were all within the city at that point.
So the original
Mayor,
development.
point of order, though. I'm sorry. The description that is in the restated amended agreement is the description in effect for this deliberation. All
So-
the rest of the stuff prior is superseded by that.
This is a reasonable question, as we're trying to decide about how this property, whatever it is, we don't have a map of it. What are we talking about? What are we
What we're
describing?
talking about is the legal
Hang on,
description in
folks.
the amended
Councilman Holloway,
agreement.
I think you're making a recommendation. I don't see a procedural issue that you're raising for me to make a judgment on. So. It's not that I disagree with the point, but I think the question in short is, are all the parcels legally valid and all the processes were followed to? Do you have any concerns about any errors on parcel numbers or allotments or legal descriptions
No, I
that
do
pertain
not.
to this agreement? Okay. Councilmember Mayhew, then Holloway, then Sunwall.
So I just wanted a question for the city attorney. Am I correct in believing there's a description of the property in this application? Is that the correct word?
Yes, there is.
Am I correct in believing that?
Yes,
If
there is.
subsequent to this, there turns out to be some discrepancy between that description and the property that in fact the applicant is intending to take action on? Is there a process to resolve such a discrepancy?
I believe the applicant could simply correct its application and ask the city to reflect that as a minor change.
And as long as that was a minor change, that would just get handled, there's an administrative process for handling that?
Correct. I believe so.
So.
But also, what Mr. Rogers is saying is that he has vetted the application legal descriptions against the legal descriptions in the amended and restated development agreement, which is the only agreement that is currently in force, and that those descriptions match and describe the same property. So-
Right, no, that was clear to me, and it also is, I think, highly likely the applicant figured out what their description was before they applied. So I'm just, because there seems to be some concern about whether or not that description is accurate, and so the reason for my question is perhaps we can move on from this if in the event there was such a discrepancy, there's a process for resolving that already exists, then there's no need for us to continue to deal with that here. We can just move on in reliance on that process. Is that a reasonable thought to have?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councilmember Holloway?
So, all right. I guess my question is, I made my statement prior, but my question follow on then is if there is a legal description in the development agreement, is there opportunity to strike that and refer back to the amended and restated agreement for legal description of the property? Why do it twice and have a discussion of do they equal or do they not? Why not point back to the one listing of it and say, that's it?
One of the requirements on the city's general land use application is a legal description of the property. Now, the applicant, I suppose, could have said, please see development agreement, amended and restated development agreement, Exhibit A. They provided a legal description for the four parcels that make up the Morgan parcel. So that's what they elected to do. They could have done it in a different way, yes, but they didn't.
All right, I withdraw.
Councilmember Shepherd?
Okay, so what we know about the land that we're talking about is a very long, as if it's in a different language, description. And then we have been given parcel letters that are associated to those very long, unintelligible descriptions. And one of the things that as I went down to King County and I looked up what the map is, the second amendment more than doubled what was originally in the original developer agreement. So to me, it's not a minor change, it's a significant change. And I don't think we know, especially when we're talking about who did we notify for this project, I don't know that we've actually know what the boundaries are of this property to even give proper notice for public information.
Councilmember Shepherd, for the sake of time, I know you have concerns about this whole project. I think you've been given assurances, and you made all your concerns known to Jason very clearly. He reviewed all those and is confirming to you that there's no concerns about the legal descriptions of the boundaries here. What you describe as unintelligible language, I find to be entirely intelligible. As a residential architect, I would sit with AutoCAD and type in those coordinates, and magically out would come a lot. So if you have difficulty understanding that language, then perhaps you have difficulty understanding some of the complexities here, the history of the different names and nomenclature that were given us for pre-annexation, post-annexation. I'm just asking if perhaps we could move on for the sake of time.
Well, I think this is a really important point, and I think that when I got to parcel J and found out that it straddled both sides of the river, I had an issue with that.
Could you precisely state what your point is? Because I'm not sure what everybody's understanding. What you think what do you think is happening here?
The original parcel that in the original development agreement was the one piece that was next to Tokel Road. And then the other smaller piece that's between that edge of that property and 202 is only the edge of what is the larger piece that goes across 202 and across the river, goes up outside.
I have no recollection of it. Every subsequent amendment to the agreement supersedes the prior one, so it wouldn't matter if the original description took in half of Snoqualmie. The only one that the legal standard is the last and most recent amendment. So Councilmember Sunwall and then Councilmember Mayhew.
So maybe this is a question for our attorney. I'm mildly concerned that we have a council member calling King County and looking for stuff that's outside the record. I don't know if you share that concern, but all these extracurricular phone calls and outreaches seem to be a breach of what's in that big fat notebook that we have. If you don't share that concern, then I'll withdraw. But we're talking about the most recent development agreement. Nothing else that precedes it matters. Issaquah could have been in Development Agreement 1, and it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if there was or was a public hearing 10 years ago or 12 years ago when those were established, because that's not part of this record. It's not part of this hearing. It has nothing to do with anything. So I would ask that we move on, and I, again, share a concern about the extracurricular communications with outside parties on stuff that may or may not be inside the record.
Councilmember Mayhew.
Maybe I recollect incorrectly, but I thought at our last meeting on this topic that we adopted a process where if we found ourselves bogged down in one topic, that we would set that aside and move through some other topics and then revisit that back at the end. If that recollection is correct, I wonder if this might be one that we could do that and just move on from this topic for now. And then
Given at
revisit
this
it.
pace, more substantive things will be rushed to where you will have no time to debate them, and this has no substance to it as far as I'm concerned. I think that would be a wise course of action. And I would just look for a concurrence of majority of the council to say, let's put this in a parking lot item and take it up if there's time allowed at the end of the deliberations.
Good.
Is there concurrence?
Please.
Yes.
Brian? Okay, so Matt?
Yes.
All right, so I have pretty much 6-1 concurrence. So we're going to move on. Go into item 14, Matt.
Okay.
Or Jason.
Okay, number 15, residential
Or
deviation.
15, sorry.
There's a request to list out the specific provisions that were deviations requested. So that is in the staff response. This is page 20 of 27. There's 5 of them. The first one is area height and setback requirements, sidewalk system requirements, the rectilinear or traditional neighborhood design, including the 50% alley-loaded homes. And then the last 2 are kind of identical. It's about streets designed to city standard street sections. This discussion does go hand in hand. Similar to the affordable housing plan, the council, the condition recommended by the Planning Commission, number 8 specifically, would require the applicant to come back with proposed residential development design standards for council approval at a later date. This would be prior to the preliminary plat application, so the council would get a chance to review the requested deviations and the proposed standards for construction of the residential homes.
Councilmember Mayhew.
Sorry,
And Councilmember Lasay.
I appreciate you listing the applicable Snoqualmie Municipal Code sections, but what are the deviations being requested? You're not, this suggests that they're requesting deviations from all conditions related to area height and setback.
So I can go through them one by one. But for the first one,
Well, I don't think you need to go through them one by one. I think you need to get us what the list is of deviations they're asking for.
the first one would be because the requirement is to generally, based on lot size, adhere to the area height setback requirements in Table 1. The applicant may desire to deviate from that depending on lot size to meet their general concept of residential development. So that's the reason for one. The second one, sidewalk system, is, as you've heard prior, the applicant has expressed a desire to build a pedestrian system that may not, strictly speaking, be a concrete 4-foot wide sidewalk. The third one, a rectilinear or traditional neighborhood design with 50% alley-loaded homes works great in parts of Snoqualmie Ridge. It does not necessarily fit with the applicant's idea for this residential development. And then the city standard street sections, as you've heard, they're proposing a different type of street which could potentially be narrower or have stormwater control features than the city's standard sections would allow for.
I think it's important to note that the administration concurs with the applicant's desires to explore some deviations and a different approach to this project. We concurred that we didn't think taking a typical standard neighborhood design off of Snoqualmie Ridge and plopping it here next to the hotel with the aesthetic they're trying to create would be congruent. So we're wanting to have them be able to explore some options that have more kind of harmony between the two projects. Councilmember Sunwall?
So again, in the spirit of trying to decide what we need to decide now and decide what we need to decide later, all these things are going to come back to us at some point,
Right.
and we can say, no, we want the sidewalks to be how the ridge is.
Yeah,
No,
just
we want,
plop
right?
plop down a ridge neighborhood. We don't like all those ideas.
Okay, so we have full discretion at a later date to reject or approve or modify any of these deviations that are even pre-proposal right now.
Correct. We're providing the council with the flexibility to address these at a later date.
So the only thing we would do if we didn't agree with this is we would want to impose at this very, very early stage that they can't do these things.
Correct.
Okay.
Councilmember Mayhew?
That may have been the answer to my question. I just want to be clear, because it just seems odd to me. See, something's being requested. We're replying with a condition that, if I understand correctly, is saying, you get nothing right now on your request, other than you can come back and ask later. And they'll still have to come ask the same people. This doesn't delegate that to staff or someone else. We end up right where we started.
It wouldn't be called a deviation if you were approving an actual standard right now. It would just be, here's a new standard allowed. They can apply for a deviation, which means you have discretion to accept or deny the deviation.
But I'm just trying to understand the thing that's happening now, because something's requested, and I guess what's happening is the condition is basically saying, come talk to us later, therefore we're really,
I think the best way to
I just don't understand the two-step here.
I think the best way to phrase this is that the city council would not be saying no at this point.
Okay,
You
had they not
retained it-
asked, they could have come back later and asked then as well. Is that true?
They could have, but without the deviation approvals now, they would not be able to ask for them later because there would be no ability to do so.
So procedurally, by having this request and this condition go back, it allows them to ask in the future,
Yes.
which they might otherwise not have been able to do. But as of today, they're not getting any other answer than come back and see us later.
And it gives us the staff.
Detail
Is
will
that
come
right?
later.
Yes.
The municipal
Yes.
code
Yes.
requires all such deviations to be listed with the master plan. So if
I'm
they
going to get
came,
confused in that. I just wanted yes or no.
okay,
Yes.
I trust you. I just want to make sure that I'm just
Right.
clear. So nothing's happening now other than we're saying you can come back, speak to us later.
Right.
Correct.
And it gives the staff authority to work with them as well on some of those, explore some of
Towards
those
that
creative
objective.
ideas or deviations, yeah. Councilman Lissay?
Thank you for the clarification. Now I understand the reasoning and the reason for listing the full section so that they have the flexibility to propose something in the future. Okay,
Right, thank you.
I'm done with that. I'm good with that one.
Number 24.
Discussion on this item
Just
now?
kidding.
Now, let's go to the next one.
I have a question that I think relates to building height. Is this the time I should be talking about it? It has to do with building height and,
Number 18.
Number 18 is building height, so we
Has
can.
your
got
name
it,
on-
thanks.
has
I'll
your
wait
name
till
on
then,
it?
thank you.
Okay. If we're all done with this one, the next one, number 16, implementation of conditions. The question was, when and how would all the various conditions be implemented? And the answer to that is, in short, it depends, because it depends on the condition and the timing attached to the condition. You've heard the discussion about the affordable housing plan, the residential deviations, and there's specific timings attached to those. Other conditions, for example, there's a community center mitigation payment that's attached to building permit approvals. And so, and then, of course, there's the condition about the Snoqualmie tribe, or rather the Muckleshoot Indian tribe inviting comment from the Snoqualmie Indian tribe. And that has some specific language about what needs to happen. But it's also designed to not allow a non-party to this application to hold the project up. So if there's a specific question about a specific condition, we can certainly answer it, but the general answer is difficult to answer specifically.
Councilmember Hallway?
So we're all aware that Snoqualmie Tribe is an opponent to this action. This condition says that the developer and the tribe will have discussions on primarily exterior treatments of the buildings. I don't want us to get to the end of this and have discord that didn't reach concurrence. So I'm looking for, maybe the city ought to participate in those conversations so that we can act as a third party to the two opposing organizations to come to concurrence on those things.
I think the city would,
Or can I clarify the question? It sounds like your question is that more of an aspirational intent or language, or is it legal to where if the Snoqualmie and the Muckleshoots couldn't come to a combination on that, it could hold up the project or stop it in its tracks? Is that your concern?
I'm also concerned after the fact that somebody takes umbrage to something done on the exterior of the buildings, whether or not it was discussed or not. I just don't want to go there at the end of this. So I'd rather if we bring those discussions of those exterior treatments to light, and we participate as a third party in case there are questions. So that at the end of it, we can say all parties were in agreement, and it's not the opponent, the requester, or the opponent saying one thing or the other.
Councilmember Sunwell, I'm going to let the attorney speak to this. Maybe they'll answer your question, and we'll go to you.
I took the LSAT. Account for anything? Did pretty well.
My condolences.
Yes, my sincere condolences. Terry Danish on behalf of the Muckleshoot Tribe. Just to clarify one point that Councilmember Holloway was raising, Condition 24 of the Planning Commission's findings and conclusions and recommendations actually speaks to interpretive materials for distribution, not any physical exterior of the property. But the idea behind it is for us to invite the participation of the Snoqualmie Indian Tribe in working on what those materials are that would be distributed to the public as part of this project and as part of the sacred place that the Snoqualmie Falls is, and distributed obviously to our guests, would be to ask them if they want to come to the table and work with us. It does not oblige us if they decline that invitation. So I think it's important to understand, and I think City Attorney Sturbank spoke to this issue as well, that we are delighted and more than happy to extend the invitation to our fellow tribe. But if they decline to participate, we do not want the project held up for their lack of participation.
Well, and Peace, I just would like, as opposed to you standing up and saying we invited and nobody showed up, that somebody from the city stand up and say the invitation was made, we were aware of it, there was no response, we moved on.
Yes.
I wanted to get the argument away from you two and have the city as...
At a bare minimum, the city would ensure compliance with the condition of approval. At a bare minimum.
Yeah, there you go.
Councilmember Sunwell, and if you could please let us know how you did on the LSAT.
I think Councilmember Holloway, the word that struck me was concurrence. I don't know that that can be an expectation or a condition. Concurrence may be something that's very difficult to attain. But if it's as simple as CCing the mayor and the administration on a letter that goes to the tribe, I think to Mark's comment, our job is to make sure the condition states that the Snoqualmie tribe must be invited. And it's Mark's job to make sure that that condition has been completed. And I think the wording here is important because if indeed concurrence isn't a thing, then one party could just do nothing, and then that could theoretically hold up the thing just by doing nothing, right? And I think versus participating in the exercise, which may or may not come to concurrence, right? So I'm fine with how it's written as long as we enforce this and all the other conditions to make sure that it happened. How formalized that needs to be, I don't know, but it's got to be a good, honest effort.
All right, any other concerns on this item,
Well,
Council?
I still have, guys, there are full-page ads out there with bulldozers.
Still?
Oh, no, that happened before in regards to some of the activity in this part of town. I'd like to avoid that so that, okay.
I think it's pretty clear that this says, it would not be fair to the Muckleshoot Indian Tribe to provide another entity that's not part of this development a veto over the project. I think that addresses your concerns. In other words, it's pretty clear that the understanding is this isn't giving veto power to this, to any other,
And agreed, I guess I do not want to give the Snoqualmie tribe a veto or hold power in here. I do want to make sure they are given the opportunity and participate in the process, and that we are made aware of any issues in regards to that as it goes through. Okay? I'm just suggesting a little more active participation on the part of the city so that we are aware and we can factually state at the end of this what happened and what occurred.
okay. So I'm going to gently, I think we're kind of repeating ourselves.
I
I want to
hope.
urge you guys, you're almost at 10 items left out of 27, so you're doing great. We got about another 47 minutes left, so let's keep pushing through if you're okay. Councilmember Jeans?
So I have a concern, if the Snoqualmie tribe responds and participates, I wouldn't want the fact that that happened stand in the way of the tribe continuing with whatever their objections are. And I don't know what any of those objections are right now. By the same token, I wouldn't want the tribe's failure to participate as evidence to be held against the tribe on whatever issues they feel that they are pursuing. And I don't think this does that, but I'm just kind of concerned that I don't want them to be in a wrong if you do, wrong if you don't situation. I want them to participate in this one limited issue, and maybe they can work together on that, and that doesn't preclude them from raising whatever points they wish to raise in their objection to the application.
City Attorney?
Sure. So, and I don't know if you've got it, Jason, if we can get the condition language 24 on the screen, but this condition language doesn't address the application as a whole. It addresses, in part, the concerns that the Snoqualmie tribe raised about the Snoqualmie Falls as a traditional cultural place. And one of the things that the condition calls for the applicant, the Muckleshoot tribe, to do is to develop and make available to its guests at the hotel expansion interpretive materials that highlight the importance and the spiritual aspects of the falls as a TCP for the Snoqualmie tribe. And the Muckleshoot tribe applicant raised the concern at the Planning Commission level that, hey, we're happy to ask, but we can't guarantee we'll get a response, so we would like the condition language worded as that we invite comment, but that we're not held to some standard of Snoqualmie tribe participation. And that's all this condition speaks to. And so if the Snoqualmie tribe can provide comment and input into the materials that the Muckleshoot would develop, that's the interest. If they don't wish to provide that, then the applicant's still obligated to proceed and prepare those materials. They're just doing it without input by the Snoqualmie tribe, and Mr. Danish's. So it's not, it doesn't speak to the scope of all of the objections the Snoqualmie tribe may have with respect to the project. They've put those on record, and the decision attempts to deal with those, and it may be that they'll want to litigate the council's decision, whatever it is, at the end of the day. But this is a very narrow condition and calls for a very specific set of actions.
Yeah, I think Mr. Sturbank just said that what I was going to say, which is nothing in this condition prevents the Snoqualmie tribe from taking up any other concerns that they might have with the project in any other context, including litigation, as they've demonstrated they're willing to do and already have done in the past, and may choose to do so again in the future. This condition doesn't limit them in any way in that regard.
Thank you.
All right, if there's nothing else on this topic, we'll move on to 18.
All right, no, 17.
Or I'm 17, sorry.
Mayor, if I could suggest, just in the interest of time, could we address number 17 after number 24, move it to the end, and just go straight to 18?
Sure.
Okay.
Fine with me. Okay.
You want to address it after 18, you said?
No, I have 17 dealt with after 24.
At the end.
At the end.
All right, make a note of that, Jason.
No problem. Okay, number 18, building height. Clarify the maximum building height of proposed buildings and the height limit for the site. So there's a couple moving parts to this. For the hotel component, the master plan application shows the hotel at a conceptual design level at a height of 55 feet. And the residential component, any homes built in the residential component would be up to 35 feet tall, which is consistent with the height limit in the city's residential zones. Because 55 feet exceeds the height limit in the zoning code, the height limit in the zoning code is 40 feet. There is a deviation requested here. The Planning Commission's recommended findings, conclusions, and conditions would grant that outright up to 60 feet. This would allow for a certain amount of variability as the applicant moves through the final design for the hotel.
Councilmember Mayhew.
All right, I just have a few questions here, 2 or 3 show questions. The first is, do we know from the record, I don't understand why the Planning Commission would give more height than was requested. Why wouldn't they just recommend the height that was requested at 55 feet?
The Planning Commission felt that a little bit of so stepping back for a sec, as I said, the hotel is presently at what you could term a conceptual level of design. They haven't gone through and engineered it or figured out exactly how tall they may need some things to be with super precision. So and this is typical, things would vary a little bit as they move through the design process. And so there's a desire to give some flexibility going forward, not to allow up to 75 feet tall that the.
Okay, I understand all that, but I guess the thing that's going through my mind, and perhaps there's nothing in the record on this, but I would have presumed the applicant would have already thought about that and in their request would have allowed some. Is there some reason why they're going even beyond the 55? I'm not really opposed to it, I just don't understand.
The reasoning is for flexibility going forward through the design stage.
Okay, great. So then, the question I have, I've sort of, in rethinking this, there's a question I have, and you may have this lined up later, related to a fire apparatus, but it's really just a height, I believe, question. And is it all right to take that up right now?
Fire's next.
Oh, it's next anyway. So is that all right?
Yeah.
So let me just. So the question I have is so our height limit is 40 feet.
The zoning height, the maximum.
That's our zoning. That's the maximum our zoning
Yes.
allows.
With the caveat that there are areas in Snoqualmie Ridge that allow a higher height, as we've seen.
I understand. So there's a few, right? And
Yes.
even downtown as well, or on the
School.
school.
Cool.
So what my question is it seems to me that the two thoughts that go through my mind when thinking about going over 40 feet is what visual impact that has, and the second is what impact it might have on our ability to fight fires. And so I'm just curious whether we have the ability, whether our fire department has the ability to fight a fire on a 60-foot tall building, or whether in fact we would have to have a fire department come in from outside of Snoqualmie to fight such a fire. And so I'm just trying to understand the implications to this height limit, what the implications are from a safety perspective, a fire safety perspective.
Okay. So I can speak to the design thing briefly, and then I'll let the fire chief speak to the firefighting aspect. As far as design, you can see some of the preliminary designs in the application materials. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and so whether they integrate well or are super visible is is frankly somewhat subjective. Certainly the applicant's overall design idea is to have this be a facility in amongst the forest, and so there.
And I'm satisfied. I'm not asking about that point because I have no further question on that. I was just contrasting the two things that I see as relevant, and I don't have a question on the first one.
Okay.
Just
so
on the second.
I'll let the fire chief address the fire one then.
And the chief did speak on the record during the hearing in front of the Planning Commission on this topic. So he's speaking about matters that are in the record.
And to answer your question specifically, first of all, if we had a significant fire in any one of the buildings, we're going to rely on outside agencies to come in and support us. Obviously, we're one station, we have one piece of apparatus, and that's not our best case scenario, but because there's times during the year when we have additional staffing on duty that can help support us. But the reality is, a big fire like that, we would end up having additional staff come in.
So Chief, let me just make sure I understand the point you just made. That has to do with not necessarily the height of the building, just the size of the building.
Correct.
A fire in a building of that size would require assistance from outside of our department, is that right?
A fire in a single-family home down here on the valley floor would require assistance from outside the city.
Got it, okay, thank
So-
you. So go ahead, sorry for interrupting you.
Okay, yeah, no, that's fine. So basically what we send to those is, our effective force on that is at least 17 firefighters. That's our standard in the city here. When you start getting into 5, 6-story buildings, or even upwards of 20 or 30-story buildings, you start changing your tactics a little bit. And it's called mid-rise and high-rise firefighting. Additional training would be needed. But we would require more apparatus to come in from outside the city to help support us in that event.
And you just mentioned some categories.
Yeah.
Is this not of those two other categories?
This
you
would fall into a
mentioned?
mid-rise category, depending on the number of stories that it would be in the 60 feet.
And do we have and would 55 feet be a difference in that categorization from 60 feet?
It would be, depending on the structure or what's in the structure. So the example is the high school is up to 55 feet. That's actually a commercial fire is what we would call that, versus a multifamily fire. So if this is a building that's got multiple stories and it's residential housing units, like a hotel or something like that, that would be a multifamily or a specific hotel, and we would send different types of apparatus to that. They would be similar, but we would end up sending more resources to that.
At 60 than at 55?
Well, probably between 30 and, again, it depends on the type. 30 feet, we roughly change it. High-value response is what we end up calling it as well. But generally, they're the same. Depending on the structure, we have also the ability to call what's a target hazard. We can actually identify that as a specific structure and then add additional resources to it. So if they were to build a 60-foot building there, and it would be 6 stories, and it would be multifamily or hotel, we would actually identify that as a target hazard and probably add additional resources to that as a single type of incident.
So what I'm trying to get at is, and likely that would be the same at 55 feet or at 60
Correct.
feet. Your response would be largely similar in terms of your planning and your responses.
Correct.
And it would require some outside assistance regardless, as you point out, even a residential one-story building
Correct,
would.
yeah. We rely heavily on mutual aid, just like our neighbors rely heavily on us to come into their area.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Councilman Lasay.
I just want to, I believe I'm not introducing something new, but in terms of the 60-foot height, the Hampton Hotel is in a 60-foot height zone, so there's really no difference between the two in terms of the hotel height. So I don't have any concern over that height, maximum height set.
Rachel, refresh my memory. I thought the original concepts we had on this project for, gosh, close to 10 years or a little less were even up to 6 stories or 65 feet. So you're actually coming in, if my recollection's right, it's like 10 feet lower than what we were originally.
Yeah, Rachel Nathanson. The original proposal was for a 5-story building,
Yeah.
but it was almost 75 feet. And actually, the applicant was required by mitigation to pay $350,000 to the city for a ladder truck apparatus. And I don't know what occurred to that. We did make the payment, but I don't know what happened with that. But we are well under that at 50 feet, and it's really 4 stories. So the 50 feet is, the actual inhabited portion is quite much lower than the 55 feet.
Dave, can you speak to what happened with that money real quick?
Would that be that pickup truck and extension ladder we saw driving down the
Yeah,
road?
it could have been. No, my recollection is, and
Not in a duffel bag in your truck anywhere.
I get to say that I wasn't here when all this went down. So my understanding from word of mouth from the firefighters is there was a payment made to the city, and at that time in 2009, they purchased a fire engine versus a ladder truck. That's our 2009 lead engine right now, not our reserve apparatus. So the city did use it for fire protection. It just wasn't a ladder truck.
Thank you, Chief. Any other questions or
Sorry,
concerns?
Chief, sorry. And even if so you don't have a ladder truck?
That is correct.
Even if you had a ladder truck, you would still require the assistance that you mentioned earlier to fight a fire at this structure?
Yes, we would. We would, but the difference is what the timing of that piece of apparatus would be arriving on the scene. So if it was responding from Snoqualmie, In the conversations we've been having thus far, it would be what they call a quint, which actually has water and a pump on it and a ladder. We could roll into that incident and actually have an aerial piece available right away to actually raise up and put it to the roof or put it up to the windows if people need rescuing. Whereas our best scenario right now is waiting for Issaquah's ladder truck to come up. The house fire we had over on Mountain earlier this year, we had to wait for Redmond's ladder to show up, and that was 32 minutes. So it's a long time to wait. And our ground ladders won't reach above the 3rd floor that we have currently on our engine.
And council, we are, as we're going to start talking about specific other incidents on property, that's outside the record with respect to this application.
Councilmember Sunwell?
If you had a ladder truck, would you still have to wait for support, other types of support from other agencies to be able to fight that even with a ladder truck?
Yeah, like I said before, we end up relying, our minimum effective force is 17 on a structure fire, whether it's commercial or residential. So, but that doesn't mean the firefighters wait until all 17 show up and then they go to work. The first engine arrives, they go to work, they're doing their size up, they're pulling hoses to the
But they
front door.
can't enter the building without help.
Correct. They have to wait for that second resource. But if there's people hanging from windows or we need to get to the roof, we can put that aerial up right away when we get there, setting up the stage for when that second unit gets there, and then we just enter right in. And there's a portion of the time, and I'm going to run the statistics, when we would actually have 4 on our apparatus because we have volunteers that additionally respond with us, which would allow us to do that, to go in sooner.
Chief, statistics would also show the risks or issues with fires in commercial buildings versus residential is substantially less given the modern fire codes and sprinklers throughout the building and so forth there?
Yeah, I'd have to look at that. I think it's anecdotal evidence that yes, there would be less significant fires because the building materials are newer, but the materials that are inside the rooms now are burning faster and hotter. Our goal was to get on the scene. In fact, when you look back in history with the Washington State Rating Bureau, they had a 4-minute response time because that's how fast a horse could run in 1 mile.
I'm sorry, Chief. I think I took us off the record again.
We need to limit this to what was in the record specific to this application and not
all right.
firefighting in general.
So we addressed 19 also then by talking about 18?
We did.
All right. So any other questions
And
on
just-
this issue, Council? On the-
Mayor, if I can, just quickly, the amended, since Ms. Nathanson spoke, paragraph 3.4 of the amended and restated development agreement describes the payment of the mitigation funds, quote, for city acquisition of fire apparatus capable of providing fire suppression and rescue at the hotel and associated facilities, unquote. So it doesn't say ladder truck. It's more general than that.
Councilman Mayhew.
So based on those answers, as far as I'm concerned, 18 and 19 are closed.
All right. If there's no objection from any other council members, then we'll move on to 20.
Twofer.
All right, number 20 is further environmental review necessary? I referred to the Planning Commission issue matrix for this. The short answer is no. Under various state laws and court decisions, the city is obligated to continue using the mitigated determination of non-significance because we have not received information that would indicate it is not valid.
I think it's closed. Yeah, you've already reviewed
I'm sorry,
it.
Councilman Ross?
Sorry, but that was mine, but we already reviewed it before.
Okay.
so
So you're okay to move on?
Let's
Well,
see.
she said we should consider it as closed.
Yeah.
Right,
I can't hear you very well either. So you guys could use the microphones.
that it should be closed.
Okay.
We're done.
So we're ready to move on, which is what Councilmember Holloway was saying. Move on.
Well, I just want to catch when we close them so that I don't have to go through it again.
I can always review the tape, too.
All right. Number 21.
Number 21 about a casino. Is a casino possible on the site? The short answer is no. The full answer is slightly more complicated than that, but there are many steps through that process, and that would take many years. The Muckleshoot Indian tribe has no plans to build a casino here. And they have never indicated any interest in building a casino here.
No what? Oh, I'm sorry, Councilmember Shepherd.
Okay, so is it possible for us to get them to add that in as a condition?
It's already written into the development agreement.
To never do a casino?
Well, the allowed uses are written into the development agreement.
And
And
casino is not an allowed use.
casino
Casino's
is
not
not.
mentioned, but
Correct.
can we?
It doesn't matter.
specify?
The council controls allowed uses over on those parcels or that area of the city under its comp plan regardless of the project. So it's not allowed use in this development agreement. It's not allowed use in any zoning.
So,
And I think what Jason, you're getting to is the only complex path would be for the Muckleshoots to apply to the federal government to turn this into trust lands
Right.
and make this a reservation, in which case we couldn't control it if it became sovereign territory. I kind of think that would be, that the Snoqualmies might fight that.
Well, connectivity to the, is kind of an issue, but all right.
So that's,
Councilmember Shepherd, go ahead.
yeah, that's not what I understand is happening with the Spokane tribe, as far as they don't have to make it a reservation.
I'm sorry, that's probably not an item for the record.
Oh.
Can you
Right.
bring in?
Well, it isn't, but what the mayor was talking about was a fee to trust conversion, which doesn't necessarily make it part of a reservation. It's a separate process by which the federal government can take a conveyance of property and hold it in trust for a recognized federal tribe. And the legal status at that point means that under certain federal regulations, that local land use regulations then don't apply. So it's not the same as being part of a reservation. But it has a similar effect with respect to local land use regulations.
I just know that in our municipal code, we don't really address whether or not you can have a casino, so I don't know that our municipal code says you can't have one.
our municipal code has a detailed, well, relatively detailed listing of permitted uses within the city. Any use not listed there is generally considered not allowed. There is a process called, well, there's two processes. One is the unclassified use process that requires a city council approval. The other process, of course, is to amend the code, which also requires a city council approval. So the planning department's interpretation of the code is a casino is not an allowed use in the city of Snoqualmie. And the only body that can change that is the city council.
Any other council members have their hands up, or Councilmember Summerall? Okay. All right, so if there's no other questions on this item, we'll move on to 22.
Describe the noticing. So, I reference the findings and also provide reference to the noticing materials. The code requirement is to notice within every property owner who owns property within 500 feet of the boundary of the site. That resulted in, I believe, 3 or maybe 4 entities, one of which was the city, one of which was the Muckleshoot Indian tribe. So that's not really a very effective notice. So we expanded the radius to 2,000 feet and sent the notice to those people. In addition, we sent the notice of application to the city's SEPA mailing list. So this is agencies such as the State Department of Transportation, the State Department of Ecology, the Snoqualmie Indian Tribe, and many others. We certainly received some comments back about that. The public hearing notice was, and I should say the application notice was also published in the paper and posted on the site. The public hearing notice for the public hearing in front of the Planning Commission was published in the paper, mailed out again, and then we also put both these notices on the city website and in the city's electronic newsletters that go out. As well as, of course, this was discussed by the Planning Commission for several months.
Councilmember Shepherd.
So did you do U.S. mailing to everybody within, what was it, 2,000 feet of all the parcels that are listed in all of the different amendments?
We sent notice to property owners within 2,000 feet of the boundaries of the site as described in the application. And there's an affidavit to that effect. And we included the map and the mailing list in the materials, so you have that too.
Okay, any other questions on this item, Council? Councilmember Holloway?
Well, just in the vein of Councilmember Mayhew, I'd like to recommend, and I worry when staff says they're going to make a determination based on what they hear from us. I'd rather we make the determination and you don't have any questions, that we mark 21 and 22 as closed.
All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No?
All right. Those items are now closed.
Okay. Number 23, non-motorized connections.
So if I could just say,
Councilor Mayhew.
as far as I'm concerned, I believe 23 is closed.
Yeah, this was one brought up by you, so you're fine to move on. All right.
Okay. Number 24, the process and approval mechanism for the residential standards, including the deviations.
Mayor, as far as I'm concerned, 24 is closed. I don't know if Councilmember Ross has a different view.
Okay, Councilmember Ross, I see you concurring.
I'm concurring.
So you're both
yes.
satisfied with number 24, so 24 is now closed?
Yes.
All right.
Would you like to jump back to number 17 at this point? because I believe Councilmember Mayhew requested that.
I'm sorry, I meant it to be after 27.
Oh, no
I'm
problem.
sorry.
Okay, let's see, back to number 25, impact of new jobs. How many new jobs would it create, and has the impact of these been determined?
So if I could I just have one narrow question left on this. So my question is, there's 150 or, so we know how many rooms are going in, we know the range of
Salaries.
condos that are going in, we know the number of residential units that are going in. Now, the one other point I want to bring up is we now know how many jobs are going in. And my question is whether the traffic, I'm going to probably use the wrong term, traffic study that we're relying on. I just want to, my question is, do all of those people, were they anticipated by that plan, or is there something here that potentially is beyond what was anticipated in that plan?
They were accounted for in the traffic study. The ratios that are used are designed to account for, so for residential, it's mostly the residents, but for businesses, it's both the employees and the patrons of the business.
They're factored into the trip generation, but I'll also say this master plan is significantly less.
Less than what we'd planned?
Less
or
than
what it
what's-
had been
was
anticipated?
analyzed, yes.
Yeah, thank you. That's the only, as far as I'm concerned, this is closed.
But, do you have a question?
Councilmember Ross?
So do you know, it doesn't show, what is the number of jobs? Any,
Well, there was no information in the record about the exact number of jobs. We could certainly speculate to,
There's no written information, but
Okay.
verbally it was batted around as approximately 100. Approximately 100.
okay, thank you.
I thought I saw in the materials somewhere right around 200. Is that?
That was the building height elevation.
the fiscal analysis in the application has a number, which I'm,
Yeah, I think that's where I got it, and I think it was more like 200. Maybe I'm wrong.
Rachel or Terry, for the sake of time, do you want to point us to that if you're aware?
I'm not sure where it's in the record.
I believe it's in the economic analysis.
So would it be a sufficient answer to say it's somewhere maybe between 100 and 200?
That'd be great for the economy.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, so if, just sake of discussion, if it was 200, you'd still give the same answer, Mr. Hoffman? Yeah. Okay.
he said yes.
On traffic impacts, yeah, or the metrics into the traffic study. Correct, Mark? Yeah, all right. Councilmembers Ross and Mayo, I think you both are satisfied with this, and you were the ones that brought this
Yes.
up. Is there any other objections to closing this item? All right. Then number 25 is closed. We'll move on to 26.
Okay, 26, mitigation payments and other fees and charges. What are the what's the difference between these various items? And so there's quite a few of them. And so I give an example of the various sewer charges as an example of some of the differences. I mentioned earlier there's also a community center mitigation payment, which is collected per housing unit at building permit issuance. So there's a wide variety here. But needless to say, the development agreement is it lays out the fees and charges that this project is subject to.
I'm fine with this. I just did have a question. Somewhere in the notes, we talked about stormwater. There actually wouldn't be a connection, so where would there be fees?
Every property in the city of Snoqualmie is charged a stormwater fee. So they would be subject to, the default is they are subject to the stormwater fee.
Okay. Even though they don't connect. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or concerns on this item, council? And I assume there's no objections to closing this item? All right. Number 26 is closed. We're on to the
27 is prior litigation and taxes. And so has the city been involved in litigation with the Muckleshoot Indian tribe? There's a fairly lengthy answer here that summarizes the litigation from a couple of years ago. The city and the Muckleshoot Indian tribe have not been involved in litigation as opposing parties. We were certainly involved in defending the amended and restated development agreement when it was adopted. And then there was separately the payment in lieu of tax case, which did not directly involve the Muckleshoot Indian tribe, although their property was certainly the one at issue there. But that was a case between the state and King County and the city of Snoqualmie.
Well, the Muckleshoots were heavily involved in lobbying for that bill. I think it was House Bill 1287 at the legislature. Go ahead, Bob.
And I believe the Muckleshoot participated at the Supreme Court level as a friend of the court, but otherwise was not a party directly adverse to the city in that case.
Any other questions on this, council? All right.
I know it's closed, but if I can backtrack for the record, for tonight's record, on that last issue, in the...
On 27?
On the
26.
employee question?
Do it.
All right, go ahead.
If we go back to the original document, the transportation impact study,
Or let me do this first. I see no other objections to closing item 27. All right, no objections, and item 27 is closed. Go ahead, Mark.
just for testimony, even though it's closed. They took a worst-case scenario
What
based
number
on...
are you on? Number
The one prior,
26?
one that we were...
No, number 25,
25.
on impact of jobs.
In the analysis, transportation impact study, it took a worst-case scenario in a 24-hour period based on 198 employees. And so I believe the 100 that we batted around at Planning Commission was either part of phasing or a greatly reduced project. And so my answer stands as far as the original analysis of that trip generation.
Although it may have fudged on 2 employees. It was 200.
I was rounding to 200, I admit it.
So we still have number 18, I think then that's it,
17.
right? 17?
Number 17, open space.
Yeah, 17 is the last remaining one, I believe.
Yeah. And 14 was deferred.
17 and 14?
Yeah, number 14 about the legal description was previously deferred, but we were going to come back to...
Oh, that's right. Thank you. Okay.
Let's do to 17
Go ahead,
first.
Jason.
Can I just
17?
ask a question? Because I have one item on my list, which
Go ahead, sir.
I think we closed, I'm just not clear on this. It has to do with the topic of artifacts, and there's discussion in the materials about a plan of what would happen with the artifacts and if an artifact were discovered. And the only thing I wasn't clear on, or what my note has, is that what came forward from the Planning Commission didn't require that that plan be followed. And so what I had wanted to raise, and I'm just trying to remember if I raised it or if that was that we actually changed the condition to require compliance with that plan. Did I raise that before? Is that something you have in your notes, or?
Yeah, I recall that, so
Okay.
I'll make sure I pick it up, but thank you.
That's related to conditions 27 and 28, I believe.
Councilor Mayhew, again, so it's not ad hoc and individuals, could you just make a motion on that real quick? Or what's the name of
But
that?
no, I
know the
think I
plan
just
you're
heard that
talking
this
about.
this is already being handled. So there's nothing,
Yeah,
I'm just confirming that something's already there.
Okay, that was already discussed and already
Yes.
direction
Yeah.
given, okay. And I believe that's an item that the applicant's in concurrence with or has no issue with, because I know that was written into it, yeah, okay.
For clarity, can we add that to the matrix as number 28?
Yeah, I can add that to the
I'd like to
matrix.
be able to track it.
If I'm getting concurrence from the council, if I'm seeing no head shake no, I assume there's a consensus to include that, okay. And again, the applicant's okay with that.
Okay, number 17 then, open space. So the question is detail the
Would it
open.
be helpful if I just asked the particular questions on my mind?
Absolutely.
Councilor Mayhew?
So I really have a bigger question, but just a quick, to make sure my understanding, I'm assuming some things, I want to make sure that. So generally speaking, is a street counted as open space? I understand that there, a trail may be a paved trail, but I'm just talking about a street that cars, is that generally open space?
No.
Okay. And you may not know the answer to this, so you may need to look into this, but there's a section, the amended and restated development agreement requires a community center contribution pursuant to section 3.9. Only I can't find a section 3.9 in that agreement. So I wonder if I have just a question about, is something going on with a community center contribution, and maybe you could
It's
report
section
back.
3.7, my apologies, I typoed that.
Oh, so it's a numbering problem,
Yeah.
okay.
Can we correct the typo then?
Yeah, we'll fix that.
I
What
was
does
actually on the
3.7
council.
say?
I was actually on the council to propose that be put in there. Rachel remembers
Says
that.
it requires payment of a community center mitigation payment of $1,388 per residential dwelling unit, excluding the affordable dwelling units required by subsection 2.2 of the agreement.
And that was consistent with the same formula on all the Ridge residential units as well. So that's why that was proposed and inserted in at the.
So is that being, so that's in the agreement, and then that's part of what that would happen under what's being proposed.
Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, great.
At time, yeah.
Correct. So then, the real question I have is, I've just done the math on the open space requirement, and I could take you through it, but in the interest of time, I'll just say that it seems to come down to a requirement, because so much of the open space for the total land involved here, so much of of open space is going to be involved in the hotel section, that when I worked through and then there's the credit for the total parcel. When I worked through that, the math was that the 29.9 acre residential site will only require 1.2 acres, or about 4%.
Correct.
But I think that is actually, I think there's other requirements that would override that, because there's a requirement for a park,
Correct. There's
a 4-acre park.
approximately 4-acre park, but yes.
Okay, so then I'd expect that actually, at a minimum, there'll be 4 acres.
Right.
Ish. So I didn't actually calculate the percentage that would be, but what I'm just trying to understand is whether that's consistent with things, and I know that you take a whole, I understand, I drive around the city, I know how, there's parks. I'm just trying to understand, is that a consistent thing with other things we've done? And maybe the whole question's moot if in fact we know that the applicant's plans are to have more than 4 acres of open space. So I'd rather not spend time talking about something that isn't going to happen if there's something else that is.
So I think what you're seeing is that the code requirement is 35% of the total site.
Right.
And that's where it ends. And so they will meet that absolutely. As you noted, there's going to be an approximately 4-acre park required in the residential component. So they're going to exceed the open space requirement. And then of course their design concept, they want to carry that into the residential component. So we wouldn't expect to see them clear cut the entire residential component just like that. They would likely retain some additional open space over and above the park requirement.
So maybe I can ask it differently. Does the city have any ability to require anything beyond that, 4 acres?
I'll have to look at the city attorney for that one.
The residential component?
In the residential component is the.
We only have you have the ability to require what's required in the code and in the development agreement. And I'm trying to flip back to the code section.
So if my calculations are coming up with this small percentage, let's sake of discussion, let's assume I've done those calculations correctly. That's just, that's what's permitted, and that's really all that we have to work with. There's no further requirement that we can impose even if we wanted to. That's what they're entitled to.
Correct.
That's pretty consistent with what you've seen on Snoqualmie Ridge, for example, in terms of the standards and the codes that the attorney's speaking to.
Right, so then.
Which is why we're supportive of exploring those deviations on the residential component, because I think there's a way that both the applicant and the city would like to preserve more of that wooded experience.
Right, so to the points that you're both making, am I correct that we could say, no, you have to more evenly spread between the hotel and the residential component, the open space? Am I right in believing that we could put some conditions about more evenly spreading it?
I think
I'm not.
we'd want to have that conversation in an executive session.
Okay, all right, so let's leave that as an open question then. And then, to the point the mayor was making, is this sort of an outcome? Is that actually just typical that you might have out of something that's 50 acres, you may end up with 30 acres that's very dense, only has 4% open space? Or is that something that we've experienced elsewhere in the city, or is that actually less space than we have elsewhere?
I would say it's pretty common. I mean, Snoqualmie Ridge is certainly a much larger scale development, but if you look at, Snoqualmie Ridge has very large tracts of open space and then some much more densely developed areas within that. So there's certainly precedent for it. Now, this is much smaller scale, so it might be a little more obvious.
Right, but to my question, just is this somehow out of
Short answer is yes, it's consistent.
It's consistent.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, if you think of it, like driving down Fairway, from Autumn to all the way over to Laurel or Chanticleer, there's a pretty wide swath that was pretty much clear cut.
Yeah.
You know, same with up on, off of Jacoby or Swenson.
Okay, so this
Where-
thing
where you
I'm
see- Where you see
calculating-
neighborhoods with a lot of open spaces, that had less to do with open space or these sort of requirements than it did with other requirements around wetlands and buffers around wetlands. So unless we discovered a bunch of wetlands in this site, which I don't believe there are, then you don't have a mechanism to add additional, require additional open space.
Right, got it.
It's
No, I'm
fairly-
clear on that. So, but more to the point, is this sort of a outcome where the open space is here and not over here, and then it's going to be somewhat dense residential over here, that's consistent with other parts of the city?
I think it's consistent, but that question you got to, let's plan to just queue up an executive session to address that one question about our ability, what kind of mechanism do we have to push within the entire development, residential and commercial?
The other element is that that's just one criteria in the development agreement. There's also requirements for buffers, the very streetscape and landscaping.
Oh, so it
The
may
per-
be
the
that once you
perimeter
factor
buffers.
those in, you'll end up with above the, well, you'll almost certainly will end up beyond just the 4-acre park.
Yeah. So you're not going to have essentially all the open space around the hotel for a concept and then no green at all other than the
Concrete
park.
as far as you can see. So
That
would
scenario
wrap
can't
it.
happen
Okay.
because of other criteria.
Got it.
Yeah. Any other items in this then, council? So we'll just address that one item quickly in executive session. I think that's our last remaining item. So the last remaining item, now that there's maybe 2 or 2 minutes, I think we want to break at 5 minutes too, is for 14 on, again, this,
I thought that was close.
it was.
kicked it to the end.
We kicked it to the end. So do you, any further discussion on item 14?
I move to close it.
Second.
Motion and a second to close item 14. Is any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
14, so.
All those in favor, okay, motion carries. All right, I think we're, good work, council. I think we're pretty much wrapped up and good place for next Monday. With that, let's adjourn the meeting and we will reconvene at the